Jesse.
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, thanks for being here. Finally, the tables have turned. I think you've interviewed me a couple of times now. I've never gotten to Uno reverse it like this yet. But we, as a podcast that is about how creators navigate this economy, we start all of our interviews with a very important question that you can answer with as much transparency as you like. And that is, when is the last time you were concerned about covering your monthly expenses?
It's probably been, about 10 years ago. I've had savings for about 10 years. There have been times when my income has not covered my expenses. Especially, I had a lot of really intense family health expenses early in the pandemic, but not directly pandemic related, but nobody had COVID, but where definitely my outlays outstripped my income. But yeah, I'm 44. It's probably since my mid 30s. Like in my mid 30s was when things finally kind of stabilized.
What was that stabilizing element that came?
My friends, the McElroy brothers, became very popular podcasters. There was also, I mean, it by no means was just that, but like that was the difference for Maximum Fun, the podcast network that I started, between like this constant struggle of just trying to keep 3 people employed, and pay the rent, to like, how are we going to have enough customer service to help members when their credit card expires or whatever, those kinds of things. These days, I do well from at least 2 of my 3 shows, my own self. And I have savings from when I was the owner of MaxFun. But yeah, that was a huge, there was like this point where it went from the shows in MaxFun, there being a few, moderately successful shows, to like the McElroys, who host the Adventure Zone, and my brother and me, among other shows, like hit the Tumblr like rocket to viral success. And that really like stabilized the finances of MaxFun. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that I wasn't constantly terrified that they would like change their minds about being my friends and colleagues. And I'd have to lay off 4 people out of the 6-person staff or whatever. But yeah, in the years since, we've been able to like broaden the base, stabilize, etc. But that was like the big difference.
Tell us a little bit about MaxFun. I'm sure that our listeners who are podcast consumers, I listened to several MaxFun shows myself, and actually had my credit card expire and got like personal emails about, please change your credit card number, which, that's classy, I will say.
Thank you. Yeah, classy / inefficient. That's how we do it.
Okay, sure. I bet it's inefficient, but wow. Like to have an actual person tell me, okay, your $5 a month isn't coming in. Could you please help? But I'm also pretty sure people don't know exactly how it works. And you started it, you had this vision for it. So tell us more about where it came from and what the ideals were that propelled you.
I started podcasting at the dawn of podcasting. 2004, the end of 2004 was when I made my first RSS feed, which, maybe podcasting had existed for 8 months at that point. And it was initially just a way, I had a community radio show, which is now my NPR show, Bullseye. And I was just like, if I could get 100 people to listen via this weird thing that is, I guess, replacing the real audio files that were on my website, then it seems worth it, right? And in 2007, which is 2 or 3 years later, I moved to Los Angeles from San Francisco, where I grew up. And The main reason was that my wife was going to go to law school at Loyola. But the other reason was because I figured if I'm going to try and be in show business, I can't do it from San Francisco. And the byproduct of that was I decided not to have a job anymore. So I had been working part-time as a receptionist at a nonprofit called the Trust for Public Land. I had been unemployed, desperately unemployed before that. And I had kind of just been living off of, they paid me a good salary. I mean, they paid me like $17 an hour or something, which 20 years ago was no joke, but for a doofus like me. But I was living off, that 20 or 25 hours a week of $17 an hour. And when we moved to LA, it was like Teresa, my now wife, was going to take out law school loans to go to law school. And I just thought, I got to be able to figure out how to come up with $1,500 a month. That was kind of my goal, was $1,500 a month. And we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Koreatown here in LA. And I was doing the show out of Koreatown. And I had I think it was 3 $1,000 freelance checks over 3 months when I moved from my friends in this sketch group called Casper Hauser. They had taken the marketing budget from a book that they had, and they convinced them to let the publisher pay me to make a podcast out of their sketches to promote the book. And I was like, I got to come up with $1,500. And that was where Maximum Fun came from. It was like, okay, I don't have enough audience to sell ads. Nobody knows what a podcast is. I'm going to put up a PayPal button on my website. Please give me money. Then I was like, well, if I'm going to put up a PayPal button, I should put up a PayPal subscription button so I don't have to ask people for money over and over. And my dad had been an organizer and a fundraising consultant. And so I knew some things about fundraising. And I just thought more shows was better than fewer shows for building a connection with people. And right around then, I started making Jordan Jesse Go with Jordan Morris, which show I still make, and Jordan had been my co-host in college. And I added a show to the network called Stop Podcasting Yourself that's still part of Maximum Fun, still one of my favorite podcasts in the world. And I was just like, this can be a sort of fundraising infrastructure. And that's where the network came from. It was like, there's no Patreon, ads are hopeless. There's no advertising economy in podcasts. But there's got to be some way for me to come up with $1,500 a month. The idea was half the rent, which our rent was $1,200, plus $100 a month for health insurance, because I only had the kind where you just get hit by a bus and they, they take everything you have, but they don't kill you. And then $300 for food, and then it was like $200 for whatever I wanted, or $100 for whatever I wanted.
So you started this in 2004 when there was no infrastructure, when people didn't know what a podcast was, and since then, you've seen all that change, including an entire advertising boom and bust.
Multiple, yeah.
Have you been consistently listener supported the entire time? Was it a conscious decision never to enter the ad economy with Maximum Fun? Yeah,
we have always, it started with kind of like, because the central show of the network, even though I don't know that it was ever the most popular show of the network, but the central show of the network was my now NPR show Bullseye. And I wanted to try and follow public radio underwriting standards. And so we always have been limited to 2 ad spots in any show. Never have done pre-roll ads, only mid-roll ads. We don't want the ads to be in the way of the show. Like I know that it's like a, 2007 idea of how the internet should work, but like, I still don't like pre-roll ads. Like I think if you click on the video, you should get to watch the video. And so we always limited it to 2 ads per show. In the early days, no one wanted to buy more than 2 ads per show. So it was a pretty easy decision. But in later days, certainly there have been many times when we could have sold more. I think ultimately, Bill Moyers was on Fresh Air and in maybe 15 years ago, and they reran it when he passed away a couple of years ago. And one of the things he said about public media was you have to ask yourself, like, as an audience member, like, do you want to be a listener or a customer, right? Like, do you want to, and from the creator's perspective, for us, it was like, do I want to be making a product catalog, or do I want to be making a show that people want, And like, when you're supported by advertising, ultimately you are a way to sell products. That's your business model, is a way to sell products. And I don't think advertising shouldn't exist. I'm not there. But I do think that as a creator, I would much rather work for the audience than work for advertisers, or have it be my job to convince my audience to buy stuff. So it was always no more than 2 ads. It was always any host or creator can turn down any ad. Very early on, when ads first came in, I turned down some ads that would have made a big difference in my life for the Navy, because my father was a Navy veteran who had spent his life as a peace activist. And so, yeah, it was always like, given the choice, I would rather work for the audience. The other advantage of it is it's just way more stable. So, the ad bust that you're probably referring to, Mike, was, I guess 3 years ago now, something like that.
Right.
It was catastrophic, and a lot of companies went out of business. And it definitely hurt MaxFun. I mean, it's the closest we've ever come to having to lay people off, but we didn't. And the reason is that ultimately, for the network, I don't know, 65 or something percent of our revenue comes from direct audience support. And for shows, it's even higher. It just feels a lot better to work for the audience, even though you have to ask for money. Like, asking for money is no fun. Like, nobody likes it. I wish that I could do it without asking for money. And I get hate mail about asking for money, but I ultimately would rather be asking the audience for money directly than asking, having to worry about, can I pay my mortgage based on the marketing budget of MeUndies.
And how does MaxFun work as a network? I mean, do you take a cut, or do you share a kitty? Like, what is the actual financial underpinning there?
It's kind of like a public radio network. It's kind of like a record label, hopefully in a benevolent way. We essentially, there are shows that MaxFun produces in partnership with the creators often. Like, for example, my shows I own, or Jordan and I own, or John Hodgman and I own, and MaxFun produces them. And essentially, MaxFun handles the business side of the operation. So fundraising and ad sales and marketing and blah, 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 blah. And for so doing, they get a cut of those revenue streams. And it's like a system that I set up because it was kind of how I wanted it to work as a creator. Like, the whole thing, the whole company is from my perspective as a creator, right? Like, it was never built to scale, unfortunately, for my 401k. It was always built to service creators. otherwise I would have made Patreon and I would be very rich right now. But yeah, it's like basically, there's a cut that comes from advertising sales. There's a cut that comes from membership money. There's a cut that comes from merchandise. We don't take anything from touring. And in many cases, the shows are completely independently produced. Like my brother and me, the McElroys produced that. They cut it themselves, et cetera, et cetera. In some cases, we're providing producers and basically recouping the cost of the producer's time. We're usually not charging for stuff like studio time and stuff, or office space, those kinds of things. It's mostly just salaries of somebody that works on the show if an employee of MaxFun works on the show.
Go ahead, Mike.
You are celebrating the 25th anniversary of your show, Bullseye, that you started in college.
Thank you, and thank you for how excited you clearly are about it.
I mean, I'm just trying to match your energy.
Mike,
really.
That's how Mike talks
like
about
that.
everything.
That is like
That's
how he
Mike
talks about. That's how he talks about like his kids. That's how he talks about like I'm trying to think of other stuff that I assume he gets excited about.
I'd love to be able to say that.
Yeah.
I'd love to practice it because it was true.
Sometimes you can hear a smile in his voice, but excitement.
Yeah. I've met Mike.
I reserve my excitement for the vocal booth. I'll probably say, but it's interesting that it's on NPR, and I would just love to, if you could trace the arc of that, how it goes from college. It seems like for some of the time it's on Maximum Fun and it's on NPR. How have those two lines intersected, Maximum Fun and Bullseye?
Yeah, well, it's never stopped being part of Maximum Fun. And it being part of Maximum Fun was part of my agreement with Public Radio International, the first distributor that it had, and it's part of my agreement with National Public Radio. NPR, I think they only want us to call it NPR. Basically, it goes like this, Mike, because none of these steps felt inevitable or even imaginable along the way. So it starts, I'm 19 at UC Santa Cruz, and I go on a tour of the campus radio station. I realize that when you're making a radio show on the mixing board, up makes it louder and down makes it quieter. And I was
very important things to know.
I was like, I can handle that, right? Like it was a time, like I'm elder millennial, like I could not afford video. And in the film department, you didn't get a camera until your senior year for one semester. So like radio was within my means. You could cut audio on the computer that I had in my dorm room. It's the same thing as like, Mike knows from music. Like I at that same time, I was on a message board called OK Player, and like Little Brother were getting together and posting their music. And they were making it in Fruity Loops, a $20 shareware program, right? And I was making stuff on Cool Edit, which was a $20 shareware program. It's now part of Adobe Creative Suite and costs $500 or whatever.
Did you have the cracked one that everybody had?
No, I paid the $20. I paid my $20.
I did a little piracy with Cool Edit.
But it was like within my means, right? So we did 5 years on college radio. My co-host Jordan was a year younger than me, so he stuck around with me. And I, when I graduated, like went home to San Francisco and was just driving over the mountain once a week in my mom's car to do my college radio show. It was very pathetic. And then Jordan graduated and I was like, uh-oh. But around that time, the then NPR station in Santa Cruz, KUSP, somebody on their board heard the show on KZSE and sent me a note and said, would you be interested in putting it on KUSP? I said yes. They did not pay me, but they had a board operator. And that meant that I didn't have to drive to Santa Cruz to be there to press play on the CD of the show. I could just send them the CD. At the time, they did not know how to download files. So I had to mail them a CD of each week's show that I burned on my computer in my apartment in San Francisco. But that allowed me to sell the car that I had at the time, buy a microphone, probably the one I'm talking into right now, and buy a mixing board and buy a phone machine. That was the big one, a telephone hybrid, the machine that connects your mixing board to the phone lines. That was an expensive piece of equipment. I bought it used and it still cost like $800 or something.
Wow.
And that was more money than I could ever imagine having, except if I sold my car, which I sold for $1,600. So that was like step one. I was on this small NPR station, but I was not with any distributors or anything. Around the dawn of podcasting, I got an email from WNYC in New York, a guy named Chris Bannon at WNYC, who was a program director there. And he said, would you be interested? I've heard your show on the web. Would you be interested in putting together like a 5-episode best of series? And they paid me. They paid me like, I can't remember, $300 each or something. But I was over the moon. But then that ended.
That was your
I got an
$1,500
email
that month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I got an email from Public Radio International. They said, if we were interested in your show, would you be interested? Because I didn't even know, I had no idea how to even reach a public radio network. Like truly, like I didn't know anyone that worked in public radio. Like I didn't, like there was the guy that had emailed me at KUSP, but like I had never been to KUSP. Like I didn't know anything. I was trying to get a job in radio and failing. I eventually managed to get that receptionist job. And I was like, yeah, of course. And then I didn't hear from them for like 9 months. And I was like, oh, I guess they decided not to or whatever. Then they sent me this, like, they said, we are interested. Here's a projected revenue schedule. And the way that PRI worked, and it's still basically the same way that my deal with NPR works, is they are able to charge stations for shows, which independent public radio shows basically can't. Stations just won't pay. But PRI and NPR and American Public Media were able to charge stations for shows, and they sent me this like chart, year 1 through year 5 of this 5-year contract I was signing, and it was adding stations each year, right? And the last year, year 5, I was projected to gross $30,000. And I was like, on the one hand, I was like, well, I'd take a $30,000 income right now. On the other hand, I was like, not sure how I'm going to hold out for 5 years. And because I had a job and I was making the show, an hour-long weekly public radio show by myself, right? And so, but no one else was offering me anything, so I signed up. And I think it didn't quite go that well. I think that revenue schedule was optimistic. Mm-hmm. But I stuck with PRI and eventually started getting money from podcasting, from the stuff that we talked about. And I was so annoyed with PRI. They're so nice. They don't really exist anymore, but the folks that I worked with were so nice. But like, I just was penniless. Like I was not like, eventually I hired my friend from college for like $300 a month to edit the show. So that I could do a little more other stuff, but I was still practically making the show by myself and not making enough to eat if it weren't for my wife's law school loans. So eventually I called a guy at NPR that I had met and I was like, hey, would you be interested? It had not occurred to me this is like 6 or 7 years into my relationship with PRI or something. It had not occurred to me at that point to shop around. But I called NPR. He said he was interested. And, the great advantage of NPR as a show that's distributed by NPR, so I still make my show, they just are the ones that send it to radio stations, is their NPR. So, they're also great people, but so were the people at PRI. But now we can call guests and say, hi, we're calling from NPR's show Bullseye. And we can, NPR is better positioned to charge stations for shows and blah, 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 blah. But always within that was me making it clear to PRI and NPR, if I can't raise money outside of this, I will not be able to do the show because I won't be able to afford to pay anyone, including me. So for many years, I didn't fundraise on the podcast for Bullseye or The Sound of Young America, but I did do it on social media and stuff. And we were able to like get enough money together to make the show. It's still like barely breaks even, even if you presume that I barely get paid. On
that NPR piece.
Yeah. Am I terrified?
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Does it feel like the stabilizing factor that it used to? I'm guessing no. But it's NPR also having to turn to the same kinds of fundraising methods that podcasts were, right? Like it's now becoming more like MaxFun than NPR.
NPR has some advantages that give it some stability. It has a significant endowment. It does, like, I don't want to present that as though it's like covering the cost of NPR or anything, but like it helps. And it has this network of stations that people actually listen to and give money to. So those stations do still pay dues to NPR and pay for shows to be part of NPR. So there's some stability there. Like they still haven't started slashing and burning at NPR. For small stations, in particular, it's a really dire situation. It remains to be seen what will happen with network programming, because it's possible that some of those small stations will have to lay off people locally and just like get down to what's the least staff we can have to keep the broadcast signal going. And so they'll have to be carrying more national shows for that reason. One of the people they have to fire is their one reporter, and one of the people they have to fire is their one local host, That's a possibility. We'll see. But I think a lot of stations may even go under. And I'm definitely hearing from NPR that they're going to have to cut the rates that they charge for my show for a lot of stations, especially the smaller ones, which means that I will, because I get paid a portion of what they collect, will be taking a big hit too. And we'll see how that works out. NPR has been, over the last 10 years since I've been with them, trying to struggle with how do they deal with the fact that they are a network of stations, but they are also an independent entity. And the stations are reliant on NPR programming for fundraising. But when people are getting NPR programming directly from NPR rather than through the stations, that's a problem for the stations. If NPR is fundraising directly for itself, that's a problem for the stations, because it might be money that otherwise would have gone to the stations. So NPR has been trying to figure out, through what they're now calling the NPR network, they're really emphasizing that lately, like how to convey to people who are giving money how to support public radio, So yeah, it's a really intense, scary time. But like the truth is that, like, for Bullseye, I've always been somewhat of a failure on public radio. So I've always had to figure out how to rely on other stuff.